A rickety old car speeds along a highway. It comes to a stop at a garage, and out steps Eun-hye wearing a red dress, contrasted by the bruises on her legs. She enters the garage, picking up a sledgehammer along the way. She approaches a mechanic, asking to speak with a Mr. O. When the man confirms his identity, he gets a sledgehammer to the head. Eun-hye, a former military combat instructor turned bodyguard, gets released from prison after serving time for stabbing a politician in the eye after he attacked her little sister. She picks up groceries and gets to her address where she is greeted by her younger sister, Eun-hye, who suffers from a mental disorder. She reveals she waited all this time for Eun-hye to return home, and Eun-hye hugs her, happy to be back home. The two sit for dinner later, where Eun-hye gifts Eun-hye a pink hairpin. Despite the simple gift, Eun-hye loves the hairpin, showering Eun-hye with kisses. Eun-hye promises to get her something even better next time. That night, as the sisters lay in bed, Eun-hye thinks they should visit their mom and dad's graves next week, but Eun-hye wants to visit tomorrow. She adds that she hates school, wondering if Eun-hye will be mad at her if she quit and got herself a job. Eun-hye doesn't think much about it, thinking maybe Eun-hye is just being rebellious, and reminds her of the promise she made to their father to complete her education. Eun-hye is disappointed hearing this, but Eun-hye only wants her to be happy and urges her to see things through. The next day, after Eun-hye has left home, Eun-hye finds a box with red shoes and a letter from Eun-hye. She reveals how many nights she cried waiting for Eun-hye to return home, but now that she is back, she never wants to lose Eun-hye again. Along with the shoes is also a red dress, which Eun-hye purchased with money she saved. That day, the teacher dismisses classes for the day, but before Eun-hye can leave, she is approached by three adult-looking girls who want Eun-hye to come with them. Eun-hye pleads with them to allow her to go home as her sister has returned, but the girls don't think Eun-hye is scary. The girls then take Eun-hye with them. We then see Eun-hye meeting with her bodyguard company, where her boss reveals that he is unable to rehire her after her incident, even though she was protecting her sister. He claims it is only business, and a disappointed Eun-hye leaves. Later, we see Eun-hye in a room with the girls, who are enjoying themselves while she huddles scared in a corner. She begs the girls to allow her to go home, but the girls claim they are all having fun. They hear her phone ringing and see Eun-hye calling and tell her to ignore it. They then order Eun-hye to change her clothes while they tape her. Eun-hye and the girls then meet up with three guys, and it turns out they use Eun-hye to entice men and then rob the men afterward. Their first client calls, and Eun-hye is ordered to get his location. Unable to get through to Eun-hye, a worried Eun-hye stands outside, hoping to see Eun-hye. Eun-hye meets with the aggressive client but excuses herself to the bathroom. There, she alerts the guys with the man's location, and they barge in, beat up the man, and steal his credit cards. This routine continues into the night, and meanwhile, Eun-hye is scouring the city looking for Eun-hye but sees no sign of her. At another client's apartment, the target turns out to be a yakuza. Eun-hye, now back at home, falls asleep sitting on the floor. There is still no sign of Eun-hye the next morning, and her phone is now off. Eun-hye puts on the red dress and heels and heads over to Eun-hye's school. Eun-hye's classmates see her, and a guilty look begins to fall over some of the girls. Eun-hye goes to speak with Eun-hye's homeroom teacher, who somehow thinks it's normal for people to just run away for days and thinks she will soon return. He also tries to blame Eun-hye for not picking Eun-hye up in the evenings as Eun-hye is leaving. She is approached by one of Eun-hye's classmates. The girl shows Eun-hye a shocking video of Eun-hye being attacked by her bullies. Later, the bullies head out like normal and get to their hangout to change their clothes, making plans to hit up a new club. One of the girls asks about Eun-hye's whereabouts, but the others tell her to shut up. As the girls exit the stalls, they run into Eun-hye. The girls try to brush her off, but Eun-hye slaps the sense into one of them. She breaks into another room and attacks one of the men, demanding to know where Eun-hye is. The man tries to fight back but is no match for Eun-hye's skills. She orders the man to talk, and he reveals that the last target they burst in on turned out to be the yakuza. They revealed who Eun-hye really is, but the gangster, Sang-man, pulled a knife on the guys, threatening to cut them up for setting him up. The scared men threatened to call the cops, but Sang-man slapped one of them. He then stabbed himself in the leg, then demanded the boys pay him, or he would call the cops on them for attacking him. He then forced them to sign a contract to pay him 30 million yen, or he will end Eun-hye then come for them. Eun-hye doesn't attack him any further but takes his cell phone and leaves. She tries to call the number on the card the guys gave to her but is unable to get through. She then calls the cops, explaining that her sister was kidnapped and she has the guy's number, but the cops refuse to look into the case and tell her to visit a station to fill out a missing persons report. Shocked by the response, Eun-hye hangs up, disappointed but determined to find Eun-hye. We then see that Sang-man has passed Eun-hye over to a businessman, Eun, and collects a large sum of cash in return. His client is worried that she might be a jail sentence, but Sang-man lies that everything is fine. He then opens a box nearby to see an old pistol and wants it. Eun initially refuses, but Sang-man gives him a refund in return for giving him the gun. We then see Eun-hye locked away in a room. She cries and begs to see her sister, but the woman holding her refuses to release her. Eun-hye tracks down the location on the business card and asks for Sang-man. The man there denies knowing him, but Eun-hye beats him silly. He confesses that he only drove Sang-man a few times and gives up his plate number. She demands a personal number for Sang-man, but the scared man swears he does not know. Before Eun-hye leaves, she grabs a taser and car keys sitting nearby. We then see Eun trying and failing to have his way with Eun-hye. Later he calls Sang-man in pain, demanding his money and gun back as he got bit somewhere he doesn't want to explain. Eun-hye drives to the location the last man gave up and enters the parking garage to look for Sang-man's plate number. She finds the car and parks nearby, waiting for any sighting of the gangster or Eun-hye. After what seems like hours, Eun-hye is almost ready to give up and head home, when, like a gift from God, Sang-man comes waltzing out. He leaves the garage with Eun-hye following him close by. She dials the business number again, and this time Sang-man answers. She reveals she knows about the girl he has taken and demands her location. Sang-man doesn't take her seriously, laughing when he finds out Eun-hye is Eun-hye's sister. Eun-hye hangs up, then drives directly into Sang-man's car. She jumps out and tases him, knocking him out. Sang-man wakes with a rope around his neck and Eun-hye demanding to know where Eun-hye is. He still refuses, so Eun-hye orders him to drive. Realizing he is unable to escape, Sang-man follows her directions. On the way he explains that he no longer has Eun-hye, but Eun-hye smacks him over the head. She draws the rope tighter, causing the car to crash. Sang-man begins to attack Eun-hye, even pulling a knife, but Eun-hye does well to fend him off. The fight continues out of the car, then back inside, where Eun-hye manages to break Sang-man's arm then knock him out. She stuffs him in the trunk of his own car, then uses his cell phone to ring Eun. She pretends to represent Sang-man, and Eun reveals he has changed his mind about the refund as he has sent Eun-hye away. She wants to know where, but Eun hangs up on her. Eun-hye then leaves in Sang-man's car. She finds Eun's location from the cell phone and heads over to his office. She meets the receptionist and attacks her when she sees her wearing Eun-hye's hairpin. She tases another man before barging into Eun's office, wanting to know where he sent Eun-hye. Eun-hye pulls a knife, but Eun underestimates her and refuses to say where. Eun-hye then slashes at him to show she is serious. Eun grabs an ashtray and attacks Eun-hye. She gets the upper hand for a while until Eun-hye gets serious and starts manhandling him. He tries to stab her but fails, and Eun-hye strikes him, pulling him into a headlock. Both Eun and the receptionist then reveal that they actually allowed Eun-hye to call home, but Eun-hye was not there to pick up. When she didn't get through, Eun-hye then called the Lucky Supermarket. An old man answered, but then a man in a suit came to take Eun-hye. Eun begs to be let go, but Eun-hye breaks his neck, ending him. She then demands the number for the man. Eun-hye is driving with the man, Ji-chul, and reveals that she knows him. He tells her to rest as they have a long journey. They then stop at a rest spot, and Ji-chul leaves Eun-hye sleeping in the car. As he walks away, Eun-hye opens her eyes. She escapes from the car and runs to a bus loading nearby. Ji-chul returns to see his alarms blaring. He runs to intercept the bus, forcing the driver to stop. Eun-hye, in fear, begs the bus driver to drive as Ji-chul bangs on the doors, but the driver lets him onto the bus. Ji-chul finds Eun-hye, who begins to cry for help, but no one on the bus even says a word, and the driver leaves them on the side of the road. Eun-hye begs to be taken to her sister, as she knows this man will take her to someone even worse. Ji-chul feels a sense of guilt, but then he gets a call from his boss, who turns out to be Congressman Park. Park directs Ji-chul to take Eun-hye to an abandoned construction site as he has plans. Eun-hye is back on the road when she hears Sang-man demanding that she let him out of the trunk. Eun-hye pulls over to put the tape back over his mouth while he tries to make excuses. He lunges at Eun-hye, but she uses the trunk to smash his hand, lock him inside, then reverse repeatedly into some junk. Sang-man crawls out clutching his arm, and Eun-hye speeds off. Meanwhile, Eun-hye and Ji-chul are waiting at the construction site. He tells her she shouldn't have reached out, or they wouldn't have found her. As they talk, he has a flashback to a meeting with Park, who smashed a glass in his face as he had been failing to find Eun-hye. Park also thinks that maybe he had something to do with hiding her. Park then demanded that Ji-chul bring Eun-hye to him as he has plans for Eun-hye later. Ji-chul, now battling with his guilt, storms out of the room. Eun-hye gets to the Lucky supermarket and questions the woman there about a phone call. The woman calls out to her husband, asking about the phone call, and the man becomes guilt-stricken. Eun-hye reveals that Eun-hye is her sister. The man, thinking he has been caught, blurts out that Eun-hye was asking for it. It turns out Eun-hye was living nearby before Eun-hye was released and shopped regularly. One day, though, the old man had his way with Eun-hye, and he now thinks Eun-hye has come to blackmail him. The man's wife curses at him and storms out, and Eun-hye attacks him. She drags him over to the door and begins smashing his finger, demanding to know who he called. The old man explains that a woman called after Eun-hye, demanding money, then he called a friend at a photo studio. The old man begs Eun-hye to spare him, but Eun-hye completely smashes his hand. Eun-hye heads to the studio, where she sees a photo of Eun-hye mounted on his wall. He claims it's just a portrait, but Eun-hye smashes it over his head. He also had his way with Eun-hye, and it turns out the old man from the supermarket began spreading the word and even told another man from the repair shop from the beginning, where Eun-hye actually used a sledgehammer to smash Mr. Oh's hand. Mr. Oh then reveals that he actually called Congressman Park. Eun-hye, now knowing who her real target is, causes the car to drop on Mr. Oh. In another flashback 3 years earlier, we see that Chairman Park had an encounter with Eun-hye while Ji-chul turned a blind eye. When Eun-hye had returned late that evening, Eun-hye demanded an explanation, but Eun-hye refused. Eun-hye then followed her the next day to see a black car picking up Eun-hye. She followed them to a hotel room and attacked Park using a screwdriver. The two fought, and Eun-hye stabbed him in the eye before leaving. In the present, Eun-hye contacts Ji-chul directly, suspecting that Eun-hye is with him. She promises to avenge Eun-hye and kill Park, and remembering how Park treated him and the guilt he feels for his actions, Ji-chul gives up Park's location. Eun-hye sees Sang-man's gun and speeds off toward Park, who is finishing up a speech. She gets to the location and sees him along with his men, but this does not deter her. Inside, Park finishes up a meal with his men and leaves them to keep watch as he goes to rest. Outside, Eun-hye encounters a guard but manages to fight him off and tase him. She confronts Park with the gun, and he recognizes her immediately. He warns that if he dies, Eun-hye will never be found, but Eun-hye is not playing around with him. In a moment of distraction, Park fights her off and calls for his men, and Eun-hye is forced to fight them off. Drawing on her skills, Eun-hye battles and defeats the men. She grabs the gun and goes after Park, who has escaped in his car. Eun-hye jumps in hers and chases after Park, managing to catch up and crash into him a few times. Park does well to keep control until Eun-hye causes him to spin out. She catches back up to him in reverse, firing shots and striking Park in the shoulder. Unfortunately, Eun-hye's car crashes. Park calls Ji-chul, demanding that he end Eun-hye right away, then gather all his men. With quick thinking, Ji-chul suggests that Park head to a warehouse nearby and he will send men. He then calls Eun-hye and gives her the location, and she manages to get her car moving again. Eun-hye gets to the location and is looking for Park's car when someone suddenly rams into her. There is a fight, then a gunshot. It turns out that Park has found out Ji-chul's treachery, and has beaten and captured him and Eun-hye. Park then kills Ji-chul. Eun-hye has survived her fight and is still determined to get her revenge. She wraps a metal lighter on her left fist, preparing for the fight ahead. Later we see Park's men bringing out a body wrapped in plastic. They are looking for Eun-hye's attack when she suddenly drives into the group of men. The men begin smashing the windows until Eun-hye makes them back off with her gun. Park starts leaving, so Eun-hye begins fighting her way toward him, not stopping even when she runs out of bullets. She takes a few brutal hits in the process, but continues to fight until she gets hit over the head and falls. Park goes to grab Eun-hye, who is nearby, showing her to Eun-hye. When she hears Eun-hye's cries, Eun-hye unleashes the beast, disarming a knife from a man and butchering the men. She bursts into the room and sees Eun-hye. Park attacks her. The two fight, and Park manages to stab her in the stomach, but Eun-hye begins beating his face in, releasing all her rage in her punches until Park is unrecognizable. Eun-hye and Eun-hye then tearfully reunite. The two drive away, with Eun-hye still injured, but having her sister back keeps her going.